Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Build in Digital micro conference on skills and training, mind the digital skills gap. Construction faces a notorious skills gap, but on top of that, as new technology comes to the fore, it also needs to ensure an influx of digital savvy recruits. So, what is the industry doing to secure a workforce of the future and ensure they not only have the key construction skills, but the ability to navigate a data-driven future? My name is Joe Broom. I'm the Managing Director of Building Digital and today's chair of the micro conference. I'm going to move on to our next keynote presentation for today's micro conference, and it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Noah Saleeb, who is the Associate Professor in Creative Technologies and Construction at the University of Middlesex. Feel free
Yes.
to take over your screen.
Fantastic. Thank you. So it's great to be with everybody here. And I'd like to follow on actually from Andrew's previous presentation. And there is so much that you can say in 10 minutes. I'd like to focus on one specific theme for today, just a little bit about myself. So as kindly introduced, I'm Associate Professor at Middlesex University, and I have two hats on. I have my academic hat on related to, like working on digital technologies and how they can be used for a better sustainable environment. But also I have a few roles in industry related to that. And one of them I will talk about later as well. I don't want to necessarily go more than that. But the main issue that I want to talk about today is the importance of starting from the end backwards. So, in order for us to address what needs to be done to fill in the skills gap, we need to identify why we need to do it. What are the end outcomes, the impact, as was said earlier, that we need to go backwards and tailor our training towards. Other than that, it's easy to find thousands and thousands of courses online that can basically train you in anything that you want. But why do you want to do it? And one of the ways that we have actually adopted at Middlesex, and it's actually been my passion over the last few years working on, is the need to address global challenges in general using these technologies. So what we start doing, for example, in our courses that we deliver with our students in different areas, it's not just construction, but in different areas as well, is what are the current things that we need to resolve and work backwards. As you can see in front of you, these are some of the problems that we have in the world related to construction: slums, poor hygiene, wildfires, pollution, all of the things which are affected and affect the construction industry. But these are even more like down to earth ones. And I promise you, I didn't create these using AI. These are actual projects that exist out there, which seem a little bit funny, but they do exist, of problems that we have. And when we start with these problems, we then understand how we can train, whether at university level or at industry level, the skill sets to address these. And within the programs that I lead at university and I've created are our master's programs in BIM management. And all our people on those programs, our participants, our students, are professionals in industry who have been working 10, 20 years in industry. So it's absolutely crucial to gear what they learn with what they're facing. So, upon understanding that, like if we go on to what the global challenges are, the first thing that we teach or talk to them about is how do these global challenges relate to construction, since we're talking about construction. So we have 15 global challenges, for example, that have been identified. The ones in front of you are the ones which are most pertinent to construction. Of course, climate, enhancing water, energy, smart technologies, and so on and so forth, directly related to construction. But what about the rest of them? What about democracy and crime and ethics and so on? Are these directly related to construction? Actually, they are. And when we have those discussions, we discover what are the problems in them that we could address using our technologies. Taking crime, for example. The previous picture that I showed about the unsafe neighborhood, it is possible to get using AI, since we were talking about AI, the percentage of different types of crimes that are being done in different neighborhoods and how that connects with how these have been designed, the urban planning of these neighborhoods, in order to improve further planning in future to avoid these types of crimes. And that's just an example. These are social global challenges, for example, in front of you. And does construction relate to them? And if so, how can we address them using technologies? So that's how we always start, from the end backwards. Also, how they connect with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. One of the first things that we really focus on when we're doing any training or teaching is how does any of our courses, how does any of our training connect to one of these 17? Again, we might say that we cannot connect construction to all 17, but I will show an example later of how they actually do connect. So this is an initial way of showing that they can connect in general, but I will show an example later on. Even something that is called the environmental impact factors, things that contain like toxicity or acidification, eutrophication. What has eutrophication got to do with construction? Actually, it does. Eutrophication is the lack of presence of enough oxygen in the water for below life organisms to thrive and live. Actually, that could be affected by the construction waste that is seeping into the soil, eventually into the water, causing algae to form on top of the water, and hence the eutrophication. Something as simple as our alarms, our smoke detectors. If these go bad, these could produce ionizing radiation. So again, understanding the bigger picture helps us identify what we need to do. All right, how does that relate to the construction industries? The construction technologies. So if we talk about 4.0 technologies, and we have a lot of evolution over the years in that, including BIM, of course. So like when we talk about BIM, and no need to talk in detail about that, but with the emergence of all of the different Industry 4.0 technologies, something like big data. And we know that we produce up to brontobytes of data now, which is like 1,000, let me read this right, 1,000 million times more than a simple terabyte, which like my portable hard drive is like 5 terabytes or something, and I thought that it would last me until I retire. But apparently, we are now producing brontobytes of data at the moment. What do we do with them? How do we understand them? How do we mine them? How do we structure them? Do we use AI for them, for example? If so, what training skills do we provide in order to do that mining? Use of Internet of Things in order to garner all of that information from the buildings, and how do we analyze it? What tools do we use it for? Remote operations, for supply replenishment, for social tracking? How do we train our uh, uh, um, professionals in order to do that? So we cannot just give a one course fits all related to IoT, for example. It depends on what we're going to be using it for, and so on. So blockchain, for example, blockchain is another technology which can be used for providing secure, immutable data. We can design or program smart contracts in order to do LCA calculations, life cycle analysis calculations, or we could use smart contracts for financial payments. But again, if we say that we're going to teach people how to write smart contracts, for what reason? There needs to be a tailoring of the material provided in order to fit the final outcome. UAV applications, for example, drones and so on, they have so many different uses. How are we going to teach that? Based on what use? It is very, very important to put that into consideration. Same thing with robotics, for example, and their different applications, 3D printing, and so on. Virtual and augmented reality, what are we using them for? Again, so all of these need to be tailored in that way. And if we go to artificial intelligence, which is, of course, the hype of the day, so I am co-author of the CIOB AI playbook. And one of the things that we identified in that is how do you use AI machine learning for different usages in construction? Like, for example, one of the usages of the supervised algorithms of machine learning is to classify. So maybe you can take images on site and start identifying whether there are risks of accidents happening, for example, on sites when something like that comes on board. Estimating end of life expectancy, that could also be used using machine learning, and so many different other applications as well. So this would affect how we teach machine learning. I don't necessarily want to go into more detail about that. I just want to show a live project that we did and involved our students in, and how that helped their learning. So we had a project with the Ministry of Antiquities in Egypt to create a digital twin for heritage buildings over there and enhancing the renovation of the heritage buildings. Not going into detail about that, but what we did is that we involved our students in the outcomes of the project. And we had a very pertinent question with them. How can we align the deliverables of this project, which you see in front of you here in blue, with the UN Sustainable Development Goals? And they helped us define which goals of the 17 could be addressed using each of our outcomes. And furthermore, they helped develop some of the methodologies that we were using on the project. One of the most important of them was actually the skill sets that we require for AI alone. And if you see in front of you here on the right, these are all AI skill sets or roles that are emerging in the market. So do we need to train for all of them? I mean, something like prompt manager. Who knew that we would need something like a prompt manager as a skill set? So what do we need to train that person on? How do we train them? Visual analyst, predictive data analyst, training data coordinator. How do you train for these skill sets? Again, because of the need, we were able to identify what are the training courses or training topics that we need to train for each one of them. They also helped in the project to identify how do we set up the IoT system, practical training because of a certain need. Yeah, and these are just examples of the things that we did on the project and how we identified even something like life below water. How can we help life below water? Well, the palace that we were renovating had its systems connected directly to the Nile River. So by identifying how to improve the water drainage systems, we were helping reduce the pollution in the Nile River and helping life below water. Sustainable Development Goal. So I just wanted to show this because this is the method that we are using at the university in the programs that I'm leading at the moment in order to help with the training and upskilling of the people in the construction industry. We are identifying how to use those global challenges and sustainable development goals in the validation of the curricula, the curricula itself, the assessment methods, and also identifying specifically how they apply to each module in our programs. So these are all of the different methods used in the modules. And this is how we aligned them to the UN Sustainable Goals. So this was just a little bit of a foresight on how we adopt the requirements in the training that we do at the university. And thank you very much. That was all.
Excellent. Thank you, Noah. That was a really interesting insight. I believe this will stop tour a lot of the emerging technology affecting the built environment industries. Have we got any questions for Dr. Noah Saleeb, please? apart from how did you get the permission of the bats and snakes in the Egypt's heritage digital twin?
Actually, the bats and snakes thing was one of the UN sustainable goals that we had, because we didn't fumigate them, we actually transported them to a different habitat. So that was protecting life above ground.
Goodness. So my question is not so much a training question, more a tech question, really. How much, in your opinion, is quantum computing key for the wider adoption of a lot of these emerging technologies like AI?
How, sorry, I didn't hear that. How is
How much is quantum advancements in quantum computing key for
computing?
quantum computing?
Well, I mean, we have not addressed necessarily quantum computing in the technologies that that we have at the moment. But in order to address training on that, there has to be a specific outcome or need that we want to train towards. So what are we going to use quantum computing for? Is that connected to any of the other existing technologies that we have at the moment? Do we need to innovate towards that in a certain time scale? And once we have these needs identified, we can then start identifying what aspects of quantum computing we can train, for example, the students or the professionals for.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
oh,
go on,
sorry,
Elaine.
I was just gonna nip in. We've sort of touched in on emerging technologies there. Noah, sorry, I've not put my video on. Hi. And it was just a quick question really about pairing students for roles that maybe not quite exist yet. And I just wondered if that had been something that you talked about at all, because it's quite interesting.
Yes, so one of the examples, for example, Gillian, of what you're saying is those emergent AI roles. And it's while there are courses out there that help with that, but they're not necessarily tailored towards specific requirements. And that's what we were trying to do. By embedding the students in an actual project, they get to try to learn those skill sets as they're trying to resolve the project itself. So for a long time at university, for example, we haven't been doing any set exams at the end. It's all project based. The student needs to resolve and gain those skill sets through the project itself and resolving it.
Excellent. I think that's something that definitely was needed. I think you can't do everything on paper and pens nowadays anyway. So it's great. Thank you, Noah. Sorry.
Well, I'd say it's a very effective whistle stop tour, I thought. So just to summarise from today's micro conference, we first heard from Andrew Johnson at O'Connor. Andrew's presentation was entitled From Data to Impact. So this was a presentation about where we've been, where we are now, and looking forward to the future of where we are with training and BIM training in particular. Andrew asked, is there too much information, too much data? And training is usually standard or one size fits all, which may not be great for everyone. Therefore, it's best to employ an adaptive learning model. And agentic AI, Andrew explained, used by O'Connor, which can stop the train, you can stop the training and ask questions, and even use a different language. Sounds absolutely fantastic in terms of a potential solution and a more adaptive learning model. Andrew moved into the human AI synergy of his platform, which eventually he believes will end up with the impact on the individual rather than just a lot of data. Next, we had a visiting professor, Dr. Noah Saleeb, who talks about the training digital skills gap in the wider sense of the word and how the global challenges could impact the future of learning. Noah then started to talk about the digital skills training and the gaps within, picking up the point from Andrew earlier about not having a one-size-fits-all approach to training and learning. An example of this is when students at Middlesex University were asked to create a digital twin of heritage buildings in Egypt. And this engaged the students in the outcomes of the project in real time, gaining real experience and developing the skills they needed along the way. So not only were practical skills and training used, but the outcome of increasing sustainability was made practically for these buildings. A new way of learning like this, without exams, really does open up the next generation of graduate for jobs that maybe doesn't yet exist. And then finally, we came to James Bishop from SCS, which is part of the Waits Group. James's role is to bring technology into the construction industry, and obviously SCS in particular, a new role that probably didn't exist until a few years ago. Looking at the digital skills gap in the workplace in construction, he took an overview of where he sits and how technology roles are perceived and what is involved. James went to say it's not about taking the tech and trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. It's vice versa. Take a real problem and create a solution using the tech that is available. Like what Uber did with the taxi business, this can be done on construction in a similar way. We may be failing as an industry to work smarter as the perception needs to change, and by showing the benefits, we can make this change in the culture of a business. James then talked about overcoming barriers and explaining steps to success, which starts with changing the perception at grassroots, and then this expands to be adopted business-wide. And I shall finish with a comment from Andrew, who commented on James's presentation saying, communities or finding your tribe is definitely the way forward for continuous learning. So we'll draw today's session to a close. Thank you very much for everyone who attended. Thank you to our speakers. And we hope to see you at a future Building Digital micro conference.